Hi, Liz.
Hey, Olu.
What do we have to talk about today? What could have possibly happened this week?
Nothing. Nothing at all happened. Not a damn thing. So, Olu, obviously, the election happened this week. I'm already laughing because I don't know how this episode's going to go. I think we were all hoping to be in a good, more positive, celebratory mood when we recorded this, but that was not the case.
No. We entered a fuck around and find out era for America. I guess Americans decided to play themselves. Well, not Americans, I would say some Americans, because obviously not all
Yes,
of
let's
us,
be fair.
not
Yeah,
all of us
some.
voted for that guy.
74 million of them.
I mean, insane. So I guess that's what is happening. And the night was rough, but we're all in the acceptance phase now. So let's see how this plays out.
Yeah, I want to share my coping strategy has been so Tuesday night, it wrapped up pretty early for us on the West Coast. By like 9, it was like, oh, this is happening. So that was fun. I spent the rest of my night watching TV. And then the next night, I just didn't go on the internet, didn't do a lot of socials, just played video games, went to work, obviously, and just distracted myself. And then I realized something around late Wednesday, which has been keeping my spirits afloat, and actually not even just afloat, lifting my spirits, I will say. And that is what you mentioned. We are in the find out phase, and I love it for all 74 million people that went with this person that's going to be our president. I love it for them, and I can't wait to see how the next 4 years go. I'm actually looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense. And when you cannot explain the irrational, you just have to watch it happen, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people are insisting on doing these ridiculous postmortems with their just clearly wrong conclusions that don't hold up to any scrutiny or any evidence at all, and they are running with it. And it's like, no, this is just what the country wanted. This is what something of 50 something percent of the voters wanted. That's just it. Like, there's nothing else you can say to make it a rational decision, to make it okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the people who's had a response that a lot of people have talked about is Bernie Sanders. He really came out with the quickness, I will say. People were still reeling, and he came out with his statement, which honestly I read and I just rolled my eyes because I didn't agree with it at all. I'm actually, maybe I'm a delusional liberal, I don't know, but I didn't agree with his statement at all. The idea that Democrats have abandoned the working class when Kamala Harris had an entire plan, the whole opportunity plan, which was meant for the working class, the middle class. This idea that the Democrats lost the working class was crazy. But like, Joe Biden was the first president to stand with the union during a strike. What are we talking about? It was really grating to read that. It was like, we're still trying to deal with what happened, and you come out with blasting people for excuses. How could he possibly think that?
Problem is that he knows better, right? He knows better because he probably knows what went into the infrastructure bill. At least he would know, right? Because it was one of the people who were advising the Biden administration. And he knows that the Biden administration tried to get something like paid family medical leave into the infrastructure bill, and they couldn't because Republicans, again, please, let's be specific, Republicans in Congress blocked that from happening. And so for him to come out and say that Democrats left the working class behind when he knows that Biden has been the most union favorable president we've had in, what, 2 decades since Reagan? Like, what is he talking about? And why do
I
we
don't know.
keep doing this? Why do we keep feeding this narrative that the Republicans want us to put out? The Republicans have managed to convince everyone, including people who should know better, apparently, that they are the party of working class people, when time and time again they block unions, they block paid medical leave, they block Social Security. How is anyone like Bernie Sanders actually saying this with a straight face?
I have no idea. And that's just one of the reactions, right? The other thing is sort of people trying to dig into who showed up for Kamala Harris versus Trump. And some of the exit polling that's been floating around about, a majority of Latinos voting for Trump, percentage of black men moving a little more than they did last time towards Trump. It looks like the only groups that really went ham for Kamala Harris were black women and Jewish people. God bless both of us. I just don't think that's helpful, though. Like the parsing of which group did what, I don't think that's helpful. Those are people who voted. What I want to understand is it looks like at this point, 10 to 11 million people who voted for Biden last time and then just didn't show up this year. I don't understand. Like was it not clear when election day was? Was that it? Was it the misinformation? Maybe that threw people off. I want to understand the mindset of the people who stayed home, because that's why we're in this situation. Trump is basically matching his 2020 numbers, and Kamala Harris would have had to match Joe Biden's numbers in 2020 to beat Trump, which we have already discussed multiple times on this podcast was a super high bar that very few people had ever reached, like 80 million votes. That was insane. That was a lot, right? She's beating Hillary Clinton's numbers in 2016 by like 5-6 million votes. So she got some turnout, but she did not get 2020 numbers. And that's why we're in the situation, while Trump did. So where did all those people go? Why did they stay home? Those are the people I want to hear from.
I don't know. A sense of complacency, a sense of just, let it burn. Just let's see what's going to happen. And, I hope whoever those people are, I hope that they are confident or at least okay with their decision.
They're not. I mean, I've heard some of the reasoning. I know this is not your favorite thing, but I continue to tell people, if you want to know how people are thinking or doing, go hang out on a TikTok live. I've done a little of that. And I will say some people who didn't vote, because some of them say they didn't vote. They're on panels. There are people are asking them why. Both sides are asking them why. And some people said they just couldn't tell the difference between the two. So they stayed home, which... Okay. It's just, no, we don't have to argue that. Nope, we don't have to argue that. The election's over. I'm just telling you what I've heard. I don't want to give you an aneurysm.
Right. This is the thing. I'm actually not interested in these dissections. I am really not. I don't think it helps anybody. I think what needs to happen is probably what we're going to get down to later is we need to throw out the old playbook. Like, please, no more with the appealing to the Liz Cheneys. Clearly, this undecided vote, whatever thing, does not exist. Stop that shit. Stop, interviewing people who are undecided and then we find out that they're really, campaign managers for somebody. No, that's nonsense. Clearly, the celebrity endorsements don't work. Please, let's move on.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true. Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, fucking Jake Paul, those are celebrities that endorse Trump, and that shit works. I think it works on the right.
It works on the right, exactly. The Trump campaign bet on its base, and Democrats just need to bet on their base. Stop with this nonsense. People like Nancy Pelosi were talking nonsense about, we miss the old Republican Party. Why? Why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep doing this nonsense of dancing to the middle and leaving the actual base behind, right? Because if people don't know the difference, well, Like, you need to tell them the difference. And it's not going to happen with you talking to like Brett Stevens at the New York Times because you want to appeal to like, the middle road voters. That's not what's going to happen.
Okay,
It's not going to help you.
I'm gonna push back on this a little bit because I want to understand when you say the base, what do you mean? Because by my understanding, the states that she needed to win, for example, your blue wall, your Pennsylvania, I was gonna say Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. What do we think is the base voter in those states? That's what I want to understand. Because when you say the base, it sounds like you're saying the Democrats should move more to the left. I would argue that to win those swing states, they need to be in the center.
That people, we keep saying that, and like we've now lost 3 election cycles. Apart from Biden, like we lost the Hillary Clinton election in 2016. We lost the House. We lost the Senate. Joe Biden won the presidency, sure, but we just ended up like bleeding more Congress seats after that. We're looking like we're bleeding more Congress seats this time around, right? The things that are popular, stop running away from them. Stop running away
what
from
things are popular. Let's talk about. Let's be a little more specific. What things?
Abortion is popular, right? Paid
family
medical leave is popular, right? Like healthcare is popular, right? Like unions are popular. Like these things are popular. And no, it's not enough for us to like go explain it to the Washington Post. Like literally Trump just says, oh, childcare, everybody's got to have it. I'll fix it. That's it. This is literally the kind of messaging that unfortunately Democrats need to start doing. Stop with the wonky nonsense. Nobody cares whether the Wall Street Journal likes your economic plan. You need to be able to say to the average man in the street who does not have the time to understand, the World Economic Forum's opinion on your plan. Just tell them, what do you care about? Childcare? We got you. Like, that's it. Move on. We keep falling into this professional wisdom, this conventional wisdom of how to do things, and it's clearly not working.
Well, I think if the Democrats had had a whole year to campaign, or at least 6, let me correct, not Democrats, if Kamala Harris had 9 months, 6 months to campaign, we probably would have done all of these things, right? They would have tried to message it and seen how it worked, responded, adjusted, made changes to combat whatever the right was doing. There was no time for all of that. There was no time for adjusting strategy. They had to sort of pick a road. You had 3 months. They had to do it this way. This was the plan. Obviously, it was the wrong plan. There's something to be said for if the Democrats had a primary, they could have tried all these messages out and seen one worked. That didn't happen. There wasn't enough time. Unfortunately, it is what it is.
Okay. I just don't agree that more time could have changed the outcome, more time campaigning as Democrats, as Kamala Harris's campaign would have helped. Because essentially, when things are put to people in simple, short sentences, people vote for abortion rights, people vote for paid leave, people vote for family leave, people vote for unions, right? And that is really what they want. I don't think like another prolonged primary was going to help when we already know what the issues are. Everybody knows what the issues are. Everybody knows what they want in their lives, even if they don't know what the issues are. As we can see that down ballot, like most of these other initiatives actually did pass. The problem is that they don't know who is going to give that to them. That is the problem. And to make the case to them, you cannot, be falling into the trap of trying to appease the editor of the New York Times. You just gotta make it simple. It clearly doesn't have to be coherent. You just gotta say, just like Trump said, I am going to end the Ukraine war on day one, right after I win, which as we have noted, he actually hasn't done that. It's 3 days now, and the war is still going on.
Still going.
But that's literally what he said. And of course, people don't actually hear that I'm going to end it on day one. They just hear I'm going to fix it. And this is how Democrats need to move going forward.
Well, I would argue that part of the issue, I know you're saying people don't really pay attention until, 2 weeks before the election or whatever, but part of the issue here with this race, in my opinion, was that Trump had spent a year running, ginning up his base, making them hype. He had time to do every podcast under the sun, have every appearance, be at every city 5 times a week. He had time. Kamala Harris did not have that time. The person who should have been doing that prior to dropping out was Joe Biden. But if we all are cast our minds to earlier this year, what was the discussion? Oh, Joe Biden isn't doing interviews. He's not making appearances. How's he running when he hasn't been, in front of the public? And at the debate, that first debate, we saw why, right? You're saying Democrats need to take their message. I'm saying the person who should have been taking the message since last year was not doing that. And that's part of what happened.
Well, I agree with you, but from the other end of things. I don't think the problem is that Joe Biden wasn't on this podcast. I think the problem is that a lot of the online political discourse that is not, from mainstream media is actually just being led by right wingers, right? I don't think
another
appearing
thing
on Joe Rogan would have helped her because that
Agreed.
audience was going to vote for Trump. Like there's just no change in that, right? So I do think that what should be happening is that Democrats need to replicate that, right? Like make it into bite-sized, easily digestible things. That's what we need to do. We need to build that apparatus.
I mean, that's probably easier said than done. Taylor Lorenz, who is a known, I don't want to say well-known because I don't know if y'all listening know her, but she's a known journalist. She wrote a piece this week about why the left is never going to have its Joe Rogan. And that's in her piece and on her website, which is called User Mag, or in her newsletter called User Mag, she writes the reason is because those podcasters you've mentioned, the Joe Rogans of the world, the Lex Friedman, all those people that Trump went on, those people are funded by wealthy millionaires and billionaires who support these podcasters and right-wing content producers because they want to get those messages out and convince people to vote a certain way. On the left, the problem you run into is the messaging on the left is a lot of let's dumb it down. It's eat the rich, right? It's like people should be taxed their fair share, shock horror. And billionaires don't want to be taxed their fair share. So why would they support a content producer that's talking about that? And that's what makes it hard to build that sort of ecosystem. I think there's some validity to that. And I think we need to find the billionaire that doesn't care about that. And if he's listening, please email us. Thank you.
Yes, we need sponsors, please. But
sorry, I should have been more PC. If he or she is listening, please email us. Thank you.
That's true.
Which then brings up my other point about some of the discourse around this election. What are your thoughts on this whole thing about identity politics? Not from Kamala Harris. Most people who bring this up will agree that she didn't push the story, the whole identity thing as much as, say, Hillary Clinton, but from the Democrats in general. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that, unfortunately, when things matter to a minority group in any way, shape, or form, it becomes identity politics, right? Like when trans people are talking about their acceptance in the workplace, that is an economic concern, right? They want to be able to work and they want to be able to move up in the workplace. That is not an identity issue, right? Like when people with disabilities talk about we need to create a world where we can move through the world better so that we can also contribute to the labor market and be productive members of the society. That is an economic issue. I do not understand this. Abortion is an economic issue, right? Like freeing up women and girls so they don't have to cut their education short, so they don't have to cut their career short. These are all economic issues, and then we pretend that because it doesn't affect a straight white male, it has to be an identity politic issue.
So the people I've talked to on the right about this, because I do want to hear, and I did and have heard some of their opinions after this loss. One of the things, which is a very, to me, small thing, but something that came up with multiple people, was them saying, pronouncing her name pisses people off. So I'm sure you've heard people say Kamala, whatever, and get corrected for it. These men on the right got into, let's say, a tizzy because they would try to have a conversation and they would mispronounce her name, and they would be stopped and told, you have to pronounce it correctly. And that would be the derailment of the discussion. So there was no more discussion about whatever policy they wanted to talk about. Now it's like, oh, you're mispronouncing her name because you're a sexist racist. And people don't like that. Even people on the left have felt like they can't do certain things because the purity test on the left is really, really, really difficult to pass. Okay. But let's call it PC-ness on the left, it seems, was another off-putting thing for some of the Trump voters who say, if not for all that sensitivity, they would have been less likely to go to the right.
Right. So I'm doing a deep Negro spiritual side because this doesn't make any sense. So these people are telling me that they voted against climate change because somebody checked them on a pronunciation of a name.
They're saying because it's a sign that people on the left are too sensitive, and that's not something they want to be aligned with. Okay,
this is like burning down your house because you don't like the guest in it. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm telling you what I heard, girl. That's what I heard.
The other problem is that this is probably coming from a lot of people who do not have to worry about their names being mispronounced, right? I know some of the people who are saying this stuff are people like Bill Maher, for example. Like
it's Bill Maher. It's Bill Maher.
Okay.
There you go, correcting.
Okay, great. But I would take the correction. I was like Bill Maher. But like in general, right? Like there are a subset of people who don't necessarily have to like experience somebody pronouncing their names like from childhood throughout, right? And I get it. I understand what people are saying. If somebody makes a good faith effort to like learn a pronoun, learn how to pronounce someone's name, we should just like move on, right? And not, automatically dismiss them as racist.
Sure.
But I don't think that the solution then is just to allow people to like mispronounce people's names as well. Like, and usually when people are bringing this up, it's because there's a pattern of mispronunciation. Like the stuff like Kamabla, for example, from Trump, that's clearly racism, right? I think somebody just, not knowing how to like pronounce the name, maybe the first few times, sure, they should then learn the name. Newspapers should learn the name. Like people who are commenting on her should learn how to pronounce this. I don't understand the state that we've walked ourselves into where just because somebody asks you to be nice to them and recognize how they want to be addressed means that they're oversensitive.
Well, I think what people are saying, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. If you're listening, you're like, what's happening? I want to try and represent this perspective because we just got our asses handed to us, and we should try to understand why. I'm going to say before I continue this line of thought, I don't think there's one reason. We're just talking about some of the reasons here and some of the discussion that's been happening after the election. The people who are talking about pronouncing Kamala's name properly, they are saying this is a symptom. It's not the thing that drove them to vote a certain way or stay home, because that's the other option. It's a symptom of a larger issue they have with the Democrats. They are caught up in things that are not relevant, in people's opinion, to the issues today, the $8 eggs that we always hear about, right? That's what they want to talk about. That's what people want to hear. Instead, they're being told, use pronouns, pronounce her name properly. It's like, yeah, but the eggs are $8. Now, I'm telling you this because I think people on the left can have really, really high standards that a lot of people are not going to meet ever. And I don't want to call you out, Olu, but you have done this to someone a couple of times on this podcast. Do you want to guess who I'm talking about?
I think you're talking about yourself.
No, you're not talking about me. I'm saying people who are on our side or technically on our side, I think should be given some grace. And I want to say, I'm calling you out here because sometimes we have talked about Charlemagne on this podcast.
Oh, for fuck's
and
sake.
I know, exactly. And I just want to point out,
Right.
he endorsed her. He's on our side. He's voting for her. We're getting mad at him because sometimes his show is a little sketch. I am not saying you shouldn't have that opinion about his show. I'm just saying the reaction people like that get on the left, we're like, they're on our side, but then we're still attacking people because they didn't meet our bar for something. I feel like we got to let that go as a party, as a side, just to win an election. I'm not saying become a sexist or whatever. I'm just saying if you want to win, you got to get people like that on your side.
Except historically, this does not compute. Liberals have been getting told time and time again, it used to be PC culture, right? And now it's like cancel culture. It's the same thing. And
we keep losing elections.
Right. And we keep shifting to the middle, which actually now, most established Democrats will be actually considered like center-right, right? We keep moving to the middle. We keep moving to the middle, and we keep losing votes. It's not working. This idea that you keep having to loosen your ideals just so you can like appeal to people who are not going to vote for you anyways. I may be wrong, but my assessment is that if somebody decides that because they mispronounce someone's name and were called out on it, they're not going to vote for their own family leave. They're not going to vote for childcare tax credit for their own families. I don't think that person was going to vote for Democrats in the first place. But that's just me.
That's a valid point. I want us to address it because I have heard a lot about people saying, oh, I would have given the Democrats a second look if they weren't the party of, they, them, which is a Trump ad, by the way, that ran in Pennsylvania that apparently was very effective.
Let's also talk about this like nonsense about the cancel culture and the DEI and the wokeism, right? Because this is what is going on. We have been hearing about this for like the last 8 years. It's been on and on and on of everybody accusing liberals of this like oversensitivity and cancel culture. So the extent that like, as we've noted, several dozens of people have now built enormous careers, enormous wealth based on that. That's why Joe Rogan exists, right? That's Bill Maher's. No, not me using his name correctly now and not like, falling into a crazy teasy about it. Somebody checked me.
Yeah, get it right? Olu.
Bill Maher has built an entire profile on this. Like every other day, someone is on the pages of Washington Post, of the New York Times, of the Wall Street Journal, complaining about cancel culture. Where is this cancel culture? Please explain it to me. Like, it's just this bogeyman of everyone has this image of, a non-binary person with blue hair, like scolding them. And this person does not exist in terms of like actual political power. They are not the number one on Spotify. Number one on Spotify is Joe Rogan. So why are we entertaining this grievance politics that don't actually shift the needle?
So the blue-haired liberal that you're talking about does exist, but they are not the top of the ticket, right? These people are technically on the left and sometimes on the far left. They exist, but they're not the top of the ticket. And I think what is happening is Republicans have painted the party a certain way. The Democrats have kind of allowed that to happen. And so now there's no getting away from the label. And so it doesn't matter if the person at the top of the ticket is center right, or as you're saying, or in the middle, because people already see them that way. There's nothing that can be done. And I think that's part of what we mean. Part of what we're talking about is like the Democrats need to own their wins. They need to own their successes in a way that I really don't think people like Joe Biden have done. I think they need to own the shit that they've done and not let other people tell the story for them. What you're describing is this bogeyman that the right has created. That person is not the top of the Democratic Party ticket. That's not the DNC leadership. That's not even the senators that all won in swing states that Kamala lost. That's not who's running, but that's who people paint the party as, because they've allowed themselves to be, portrayed a certain way for years, and now there's no escaping it in like the psyche of the American voter.
Because they keep conceding, right? Like they keep going to these folks who make the accusations and then try to like defend themselves, and that only just buys into the narrative. I don't understand how like these people get to paint themselves as the party of the working class. Meanwhile, they get to call liberals snobs. They get to call liberals enemies of the people, and then liberals go to them and try to convince those people, when no, the people you should be trying to convince is the actual person on the street. And what the person on the street wants to hear, they don't really want to hear about your philosophical like stuff about climate change. They want to hear that if their home floods, that you'll be there to help them. And that is the conversations we should be having, and that's how we should be putting out the message.
I mean, I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you on this at all. I think the messaging needs to be more clear to people. How long have I been saying that? I literally said that all summer. I'm like, I hope the campaign is getting the message out. Well, we finally got the test on Tuesday. Turns out they had not. And I don't want to put this on Kamala Harris. Like I said, she only had 3 months, But
this is the thing. I don't think this is a problem with Kamala Harris.
I don't think so either.
A member of the Democratic Party. She's only a part of the liberal movement, right? I think this is a problem with the entire liberal left coalition in the first place.
I don't think I hear people saying, "Oh, she ran a flawless campaign." I wouldn't say that. I'm not going to go that far, but I don't put this on her at all. The time to campaign for this election was January 2021. The minute Biden got into office, because that's what Trump was doing. The minute this was over last time, 2021, he began running this campaign. And, his plan worked. The Democrats, they were very focused on law and governing, which they should be, as responsible stewards of the government. But they also should have been running a campaign. The number of people who have no idea what Joe Biden has accomplished in his term is insane. People really don't know what he's done. And they may not know when that stuff gets undone by the next president. So we have to do a better job of telling people, and I say we, I mean Democrats, I mean liberals, whatever you want to call it. We have to do a better job of delivering the message in digestible pieces.
Right. And we have to do a better job of holding Republicans responsible for their policies.
That is amazing.
Stop with the bipartisanship nonsense. A lot of stuff that people at the top of the Democratic Party, like Nancy Pelosi, would do, talk about, they miss, the party of Reagan, they miss Republicans. No, when people ask you, why don't we have a right to our body? Like, you should say, because Trump blocked it. Although I do feel like Kamala Harris did say that multiple times, right?
But people weren't listening.
But people weren't listening, because one statistic that is blowing my head is that apparently 49% of people who supported abortion rights voted for Donald Trump, and then 49% of people who supported abortion rights voted for Kamala Harris. For some reason, we haven't worked out how to make it stick to Republicans, how to make their actual policies and their actual actions, how to make it stick. Meanwhile, liberals are being held responsible for everything all the time.
Yeah, I mean, on the abortion issue, I found that fascinating too. I found it fascinating that in the swing states, the Democratic senators won, just not Kamala Harris. Like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, they all had Democratic senators on the ballot. They all won their seats. Kamala lost the election. In Arizona, the abortion measure passed, right?
Right.
But Kamala lost. Some percent of people went in there, voted to keep abortion legal in their state, and then voted for the guy who's going to make that a problem for them. And the response, I saw an interview, which I'm sure a few people have seen, a girl, I'm calling her a girl, she's like in college and I'm old, but she was asked, what do you think about abortion? You voted for Trump. She said, because he's going to leave it to the states. And I thought to myself, this is a problem of education, because if you understand how the U.S. works, your state can do what it wants, but there's a federal government. There's a federal government that also sets rules, and states have to abide by many of them. So it's just, how do you fix that cognitive dissonance or clarify that information? The fact that that girl thought she was enshrining abortion, but also voting for a man who's probably going to put a national ban in, like, let's be clear, doesn't make any sense. But that's how people were voting this year. Insane ways.
I agree with you. I just don't agree that's necessarily the Democrats' fault, because I that example, I don't know how else you can make it clear to someone.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's back to your point about media, right? Like, where was she getting the information from?
Exactly.
That leaving it up to the states makes the most sense.
When you're doing your baking tutorial, when you're doing your, home improvement tutorial, like, you should then, like, tell people who is actually going to give them the rights they want, right? Like, that's just a problem, right? Like, this is literally how we have to do it.
Oh my God. Honestly, I don't know if it's that deep.
This is literally how we have to do it. Did you see the Jimmy Kimmel skit where they, like, stopped people on the street and asked them on November 6th if they were going to vote on November 6th? And except for one person, they all said, they were going to vote on November 6th, including a young white lady who was like, yeah, I support Kamala Harris. I'm going to vote for her today. I hope she wins. And you're like, it's driving you crazy, because there are people out there who they know what they want. They just don't know how to get it. And we have to show them the roadmap of how to get it. Unfortunately, we have to, like, walk them all the way down to the line.
Let's do this. I think generally speaking, we can talk about the reasons for this election loss all you want, but the reality is it's happened, right? And the worst case scenario has happened. In fact, I think the Republicans are going to take the House too.
Yeah.
So we are now in a situation where Democrats have a choice. And I would love to get your thoughts on what I think is the correct response, which is, let's just let people experience things for themselves. Let's not save the Republicans from their own nonsense. What are your thoughts on this? That's my perspective. Because you're saying, Democrats need to, let's go focus on running in 2026 for the midterms and leave them to govern and see how that turns out.
Well, there's a wise old adage that says experience is the best teacher.
Yes, I agree.
So, let's see what shakes out. I don't know if Republicans will be able to, like, weasel their way out of it again. Who knows? Maybe somehow be able to jujitsu it and blame Democrats for a situation that a Republican White House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican Congress, House of Rep is in charge of. Who knows? Who knows if they're going to be able to pull that off? But maybe they won't, and people will see what's going on.
Well, I really do think there's some percentage of the Trump voter this year that's not a MAGA person, right? Like, that's the thing. It's like I think there's a difference between the Republicans and the MAGA people. The MAGA people are always going to be here, unfortunately, and God help them, because, their guy has won for the last time. So I don't know what they're going to do in 2028. But the Republican voter, I'm going to give them some credit and say they can and will get fed up with their representatives, eventually. Not all of them, because, again, we're not going to get everybody, but some percent of them are going to be like, this doesn't make any sense. We gave you all three branches of government, basically. I mean, let's be fair, right? The Supreme Court even is part of this, like, right. They have everything, basically.
Right.
So go forth and do you. And Democrats should just pull back. It's like when they were trying to elect a Speaker of the House and they had to do it 15 times. And eventually the Democrats had to put some votes in to help them elect, what was his name? Can't even remember. Elect dude, right? that was Democrats bailing them out.
Is the Speaker?
Well, he's a Speaker now, but remember, was it Boehner? I can't remember. Whatever that dude's name was, Democrats had to come save them, right? They had to come put some votes in so they could finally pick a speaker after like 2 weeks of nonsense. Let's not do that this time, okay? For example, Trump's tax cuts. They're going to have to come up with a new tax plan. What are they going to do? Let's not help them. Let them figure it out. The Affordable Care Act / Obamacare. What are they going to do? Let's not help them. Let's let them figure it out.
I completely agree.
I think as we're getting to the end of this discussion, the two reasons people gave for why they voted for Trump were the economy and immigration. On the economy, there are tax plans that need to be refreshed, updated, changed, whatever you want to call it. There's concerns around inflation. You know, I keep hearing so much about $8 eggs. $8 eggs, $10 milk. That's why people voted for Trump. You know, they want him to take them back to the glory days of 2019, apparently. I just want to say that I am going to be eagerly awaiting Trump's first statements on what his economic plan is, because all we have heard so far has been tremendously stupid, which is tariffs. Tariffs, everyone's favorite word right now. I'm curious what he's going to do on the economy, because that seemed to be the greatest motivator. People ignored the misogyny, the racism, the sketchiness, the grifting, the incoherence. They ignored all of that because of $8 eggs. So I want to know how that goes. And then on immigration, it sounds like, and I'm sure we'll get more analysis on this later, but it sounds like a lot of people voted for Trump because of immigration, because that whole, you know, they're taking your jobs shtick worked, even though it's not based in reality. You know, they're taking resources away from your cities. That whole thing worked. And that's what drove a lot of people. That's what drove things like New York turning a little more red than usual. You know, like Kamala really losing ground in some blue states. So I'm also curious how that's going to go. Those two issues are things I'm going to be looking out for in the next 4 years.
I mean, well, regarding immigration, we don't have to look very far. Unfortunately, one of the many incoherent things about the Trump administration and the support they have for immigration is that most people actually support what they call legal immigration, right? So let's look at what happened in the last administration. Well, H-1B visas were being denied, they were being delayed. The Trump administration required more documentation. For example, if you already had an H-1B visa and you were supposed to just renew, usually the agency could go with their previous determination, but now people had to start it all over again.
Okay, and before you continue, because we've just said we need to simplify the message. For people who don't know, the H-1B visa is a work visa that you get as you're immigrating to the U.S. to work. And these are visas that people who come here as nurses, teachers, doctors, engineers, that's the visa they use, especially engineers. That's the visa they use. So I just want to clarify, when you hear H-1B, that's the work. You came here because you were hired by an American company visa.
You know, there's even like H visas for farm workers, for example, right? But this is the problem. Nobody actually understands what they're voting for, right? Because you're right. I'm going down this rabbit hole of explaining the policy behind work visas, right? And unfortunately, people's eyes glazes over. Mm-hmm. But like those things are going to be delayed, reduced. People who want to file for their spouses to join them because they're working here, the H-4 visa, that's also going to be curtailed, right? So like, I do not understand people keep shooting their like nose to spite their face. You don't want immigration at the border. Well, that's usually much, much harder to solve. Meanwhile, what's easier to actually like curtail is the legal immigration, because like they literally have to go through embassies and you can actually identify them and stop them.
So you're saying you think Trump's going to start there first?
Well, that's what happened in the last administration, right? That's actually what happened in the last administration. People were being denied work visas. There were more delays in work visas, and people are freaking out. People who actually want to come here legally, who have PhDs, who actually have advanced degrees and skills, which is what we all say we want, right? We want people who are going to come contribute to our economy. Well, those are the people who are actually easier to block from coming in.
Yeah, and I think on the economy question, you know, the price of eggs is not a government set price. There's nothing Trump has suggested that will actually lower the cost of daily goods for people. In fact, most analysis is showing that if he implements his plan as he has described it, expenses will go up for people in the lower to lower middle class income range. So if you earn under around $150,000 a year, your cost of living is actually going to go up if Trump's plan is implemented. And let's be honest, based on the polls and exit polls, that is the majority group that voted for Trump. So I think, as you said earlier, experience is the best teacher. We're going to see how this plays out. First thing Trump's going to do is probably what Olu is saying, is go after immigration and maybe legal immigration as a way to show that he's doing something on the issue. And then maybe they'll figure out what to do on the economy, because that's a more complicated solution. I know Trump has made it sound easy this entire campaign. You know, he's just going to yell at the companies and they're going to lower the price of groceries. That's not how shit works. So we're going to see what his plan is. Unfortunately, I think people are going to have to suffer to learn a lesson. It's not something I'm like relishing. I'm just pointing it out because, again, if Trump does what he says he wants to do, people who are in not great situations financially are going to get into even worse situations. And this is just how Republicanism works. You know, trickle-down economics has never worked in this country, but they keep trying to shove it down our throats, and this is going to be another attempt. And that's going to be what happens for the next 4 years. And on that note, I think that's a good place to end here. You know, let's see how this goes. We now have, as we said earlier, Republican White House, Republican Senate, looks like a Republican House, and let's be honest, a Republican Supreme Court. So we'll see. We will see. This is going to be, if you're a Republican, this is the dream, right? You have everything in hand. I say, Democrats, let's step back a little. Let the liberals step back. I know it may sound counterproductive, but I think if we could let people see what actually happens when the things we describe happen, maybe people will learn.
Right. And just take steps to ensure that come 2028, people actually recognize who is responsible for the state of their lives.
Why we wait until then? There's midterms in 2026. I think true. I think we should say 2026 because the reality is, I think after 2 years of this, people will realize this was not a good idea. I don't think we need to drag this on till 2028. I have compared this, and I've seen a lot of people compare this to Brexit, which, if you're not familiar, because you're in the U.S. and you're like Brexit. The British people were really riled up about things like immigration and apparently their economy, and were convinced by the more conservative people in British government to leave the European Union, which is basically a European trade club and group. The British people voted to leave, despite all the pleading, all the stats, all the scientists saying this was a horrendous idea for their economy. They voted to leave. They finally left a few years ago. Their economy has not been great. Now, you're going to say there was a COVID, sure, but it's been on top of that their economy has not been great. And a lot of people regret that vote, but they had to live through it first because they had been threatening to leave the EU for decades and finally got what they wanted. And it turned out it was a terrible mistake for the British people. And I think this is America's Brexit moment. So we should let people actually get what they want. And let's just see how it goes.
Yes. It is astounding, again, how people voted for the slogan, independence from the EU, we'll go our own way. And then, they found out that the farmers found out they couldn't sell their tomatoes and bananas and stuff like that because, well, guess what? You still have to meet EU regulations. And if you're not in the EU, now you have more paperwork to jump through. People found that they couldn't keep their homes outside of Britain. People had homes in Spain and Italy and France because they had all the special considerations, right? When they were in the EU. just again, just leopard bit my face stuff, right? And the
Yeah.
NHS just keeps getting worse and worse. That extra funding that Boris Johnson promised them was magically going to be injected into the NHS if they left the EU never happened.
And again, NHS is the National Health Service in the UK. They have socialized medicine over there. It's government run. That's what she's talking about.
Honestly, I feel like
we got to clear these things up. We got to clear these
I
things
feel
up.
like we should have like notes or something. I know
need a glossary.
right, but this is the problem. Like, it's so hard to get people to understand like what they're voting for. Okay, but essentially, let me dumb it down. Free healthcare is being threatened in the UK
Yes.
directly due to Brexit.
There you
That's
go.
the message.
There, see, I knew you could do it. We just need to, you know what? We should become political consultants for the Democrats. Let's go. They should stop listening to all those ones they had this time around. Y'all call us, okay? We have experience. We have argued with people on TikTok, Threads, Instagram,
YouTube.
on the phone. We got this. Let us know. Give us a call. Send us an email.
A big thank you to our listeners for being with us so far. We will be watching and discussing the next 4 years with you. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do share with your family and friends. As always, you can find us on Threads and TikTok as Liberal Banter. You can also visit our website, liberalbanter.com. See you next time. Bye-bye now.